Welcome, Falmouth, to another edition of Falmouth Cares. This is an informative show here on Zoom to provide you with some information about the current COVID-19 pandemic and about how Falmouth is responding, its government, its business community, and its citizens to adapt to this new normal. With me today, as always, are Bill Zammer, Gary Vacon, and Michael Kasparian, the president of our local Chamber of Commerce. And we're thrilled today to have two members of our Selectboard, its chair, Megan English Braga, and Sue Moran, who is also the chair of the Barnstable County Economic Development Council. So we'll talk about both local and regional, how the government is partnering with private business to get through this. And I guess get through this is the operative phrase. You know, we hear a lot these days about our new normal and about changing to adapt to these current uncertain times. It seems that I say many times a day, the only certainty these days is uncertainty. And so we're here to try to really help you, our small business people and the people who work in and support local businesses, which encompasses just about everyone in our community. We're here to try to help you understand this unfolding puzzle and helping you put the pieces together on a daily basis and answer the questions you may have. So let's get right to it. Bill Zammer, as the owner of the Flying Bridge and one of the leading restaurateurs on Cape Cod, you have been through the process. And in our last show, we were very fortunate to have Bert Tallerman from Cape Cod 5 and Congressman Bill Keating talking prospectively about the Paycheck Protection Program and the Disaster Loan Program. Now we have the ability to really, Bill, get your perspective as someone who's been through it. So share with our viewers, you've gone through the process, you've been approved. What's next?
Thanks, Troy, and welcome to Megan and Sue onto the program. As I mentioned last week, the PPP is not a panacea for all the businesses on Cape Cod. As a matter of fact, we are, in fact, very hindered by the rules and regulations. I would start out by saying this is my experience to the best I can find as far as the information you need for all this. But again, you need to contact your accountant or whomever to do your own work. So here's the story. You've gotten a loan. For example, I had my loan approved, and the bank called me today, and they're about to put the money into my bank account. My problem is I can't comply now. They've upped the ante too soon. So in this case, I've got 8 weeks from the time that the money goes into my bank account to utilizing the funds for payroll, utilities, or rent in that case, if that were the case, or interest on a mortgage. So I now have 8 weeks. That 8 weeks takes me to June 8th. I have to begin paying my employees their average salary that I had last year, the ones that were working on February 15th, their payroll for 8 weeks. At that point, they would be coming off unemployment. So in order for me to make this work, I would bring my employees back on partial unemployment in order for them to collect the $600 that the government is giving them for the stimulus money. So I'd put them on 80% of their pay. I would be putting that money out of my pocket in order to get them full pay and me to get loan forgiveness. And that's the key to this thing, loan forgiveness. By doing so, I have to then, on June 30th, have those same people on my payroll. I can't do that. I have no idea if we open up in, say, June 6th or 7th or 8th, we open the restaurant, for example, whether or not I need all those employees, because we have no idea how the economy is going to open up. Will they, in fact, people be cut back to, for example, smaller capacity in the restaurant? Will we be hindered by other restrictions? So I have no idea what happens between then and the 30th of the month. But in the meantime, I'm now paying them again. I have to keep them on the payroll regardless of the business I'm doing for that 3 weeks. So I hope that you understand that. So although they're giving me 8 weeks, when it comes to that money, then the next 3 weeks I have to come out of my pocket. If I don't do that, I lose the compliance and I lose forgiveness. In other words, the other 8 weeks now will come out of my pocket because I've now paid them instead of having them on unemployment. You have to be very, very careful as to how you review your particular situation. And it's not the bank's fault. The SBA has decided that the date you get the money, the clock starts ticking. On Cape Cod, that's not very good for us because I would rather, for example, have had my money come out on May 4th and give me the 8 weeks to June 30th. That would have given me a better chance to get the employees back on June 30th. instead of those 3 weeks hiatus I'm going to have to deal with. But the other part, of course, is the money is a 1% interest loan. So the amount of money you take, you can keep and use and keep for 2 years and pay at 1%. And I gather the first payment's not due for 6 months on that loan. So using that money for whatever you use it for is also a good idea. But again, you're paying that money back. The forgiveness portion of this loan, you've got to be extremely cautious as to how you calculate it, or you're going to be paying it out of your own pocket. And I'm not sure that's a great idea for many businesses. I don't see personally how, and I've talked to the bankers and I've talked to other people, how personally this is helping the seasonal businesses on Cape Cod. Because you're going to have, if they give you the money now, where are you going to get the money to start up on the in June 8th, after June 8th? Where's that money going to come from? You've already used the money for your payroll before that and what other expenses you have. So you still have no funds going forward the way they've constructed this payroll protection program. So.
Well, Bill, thank you. I mean, that's very valuable to really frame the discussion. So I think it's really important for those people out there that are watching to be very careful. Certainly, and as we've been encouraging them to do, and as the congressman did last week, access the money. But what you're saying, Bill, is be really careful about how you spend it and meet the guidelines so that it can be reimbursable. Michael, what sort of resources are out there beyond dialogues like this to help guide people on how best to use that money?
There's a lot of information that we have listed at the Falmouth Chamber website, as well as Cape Cod Chamber has it, U.S. Chamber, all the chambers really have it. But I think to Bill's point, which is very important, is that it can be very confusing. I think if you're a non-seasonal business, it's really cut and dry. You get the money today, you keep your people on for 8 weeks. Hopefully you keep going along. At the end of 8 weeks, hopefully at that point you're going to be able to continue. In a case like what Bill's talking about, it becomes very muddy. It becomes unclear. So he gets his money now, he has to start. If the application process is delayed for some reason, 30 days or down the road, and people get their checks later, that might be actually a benefit. But again, people want to get their applications in before the money runs out. Probably the best resource is your banker, your business banker, because they're working with the SBA. I know that they're trying to gear up and team up, get the information and to make sense of it. I think what's important for people to understand is this is a $2.2 trillion package, part of $350 billion that Congress said to the SBA, let's get this money out. I mean, that was like two weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago. And it's hard. They're trying to figure it all out. What does the SBA normally do, Bill? I think, Bill Zammer, I think you and I had this conversation. They normally do, about $50 billion a year in new business loans? Yep. And now they're being asked to get $350 billion out. And it's been 2 weeks. So there is going to be some growing pains. It's challenging. The information that's available is, again, can be accessed through our website. SBA puts it out there, but I think your local banker is probably most tuned in and paying attention.
Mike, I got to contradict you a little bit. The banks, it's the SBA that's rolling out the rules, and unless they keep moving the goalposts. And you're absolutely correct. I know a large nonprofit that just got their loan for the approval, and they're a year-round operation. Obviously, the same number of people all year round. So their forgiveness portion, which is quite substantial, will be forgiven because they can comply on June 30th.
Right.
So those non-seasonal businesses, yes, if they're bringing people, if they're keeping the people on June 30th that they had on February 15th, they will comply. But it's
well, that's very helpful. And Congressman Keating did say that he'd be back, and so we should have him back on this show on a regular basis. We will continue to record these Falmouth Cares updates on a weekly basis throughout this pandemic. So we will have Bill Keating back on here, I think, to pose some of those important questions, particularly, Bill, those that you raised, so that our local business people who are accessing those funds understand both the risks and the rewards to this unprecedented amount of money.
And Troy, maybe the banks at that point, by next week, will have some more substantial feeling about the regulations that are going to control the forgiveness portion of this. And maybe
I think they will.
A bit looser, hopefully.
I think they will, because, again, they're the ones dealing with the SBA.
Yep.
It's hard to read through all that and try to make sense of it. It's best to go to a professional And you're right, Bill. I agree that the goalpost kind of gets moved. And again, they're trying to figure this whole thing out. But I think staying close with your local banker, if you have a good relationship with, is your best bet at trying to find your way through this.
Take the money and worry about it later.
So that was the congressman's advice too. Seriously, it was to access the funds if you can, and then seek help. If you're watching the show, the people around this virtual table have a significant amount of experience in public policy and private business, and so that's why we're here. We call our group Falmouth Cares because the people on this show care about the community and its economy, and that's a good transition, I think, to bring Megan and Sue into this discussion. When we were preparing for today's show, ladies, we were talking about a theme, and I think our theme for today's show is how will we? What we really want to talk about with you is how will we, in that broad category, but then really specifically talk about how will we adapt, but also how will we innovate? How will we change the relationship between business and government? How will we respond to this? Because as challenging and unprecedented as these times are, we really have seen in our business community and people's creativity in terms of innovation, really almost unprecedented entrepreneurial spirit. And that really is a silver lining in this sometimes very dark cloud. So I think we look to you guys to really, let's talk about that and how do we adapt and change in a positive way the relationship between business and government to get us all through this. Megan, why don't you start?
Sure. So let me just start by kind of tagging on to something that we were just talking about, which is, all of this is very new. So applying for and getting those funds, even with the challenges that Bill is raising, and frankly, the Cape always faces those challenges, whether it's with the H-2B visa workers, because our season is very different and it starts at, a different period than when those visas sometimes are due. We, as a seasonal economy and the way our season runs and when it starts, we're always in kind of a particularly challenging spot for seasonal businesses. What I would say is the sort of challenges that Bill is raising, it doesn't mean that through advocacy, working with our state legislators, through our congressmen, our senators, that some of those tweaks can't be made down the line that address exactly what Bill is talking about. So I think it is still excellent advice to apply now and get those funds. And we continue to advocate. We continue to have those conversations with our lawmakers about why we need, perhaps for seasonal businesses, a bit of a different take, a different view. So, as this progresses, this is, again, just an unprecedented amount of money to be really injected into the economy. And I think there'll be, our hope is some adjustments that are appropriate and benefit our small businesses as we go along. And that's part of what we'll continue to advocate for. And, I can just say at the local level, the board is regularly receiving, really input and concerns, questions from individuals in our community about how are we going to support small businesses. And what I would say is this, it's an ongoing dialogue. We're thinking about all of the different ways to really support our businesses in town, seasonal and otherwise. But of course, the big questions we keep getting are, what's going to happen this summer? And there isn't a definitive answer, to give just yet. First and foremost, the town is going to be guided by public health and, directions around what is best for safety, because people being healthy and getting through this is going to ultimately be what is best for not just individuals, but our economy. A sort of staggering, stumbling down continuously, maybe opening everything up too soon and relapsing and having issues, that is going to be a death knell for a lot of businesses. So the most important thing is to come out very strong in terms of public health. And then beyond that is to really be, and I think we've shown that we're doing this already, very strategic in the way we approach. We've tried to be limited in the way we've kind of closed things down, looking at as the problems arise, limiting the public's access to certain things. Obviously, we're guided by the state as well and controlled at some level by what the state is doing. But we've really actually been kind of a step in front of Governor Baker, and I think he's done a tremendous job, but we've really looked at what is happening in Falmouth and how do we best serve residents here. You know, we are, again, every town is different. We are a beach community. We're a community with a lot of open space. We're a place where, you know, people interact in a certain way. And so all of that is something that the board takes a look at, work with our health agent, with our public safety, you know, with our chief of police, our fire chief, to really think about how we can, you know, keep people safe, but also try to support those businesses and not have kind of a blanket shutdown on everything, you know, and again, now we're in the shutdown mode. So we're working back to how will we reopen and what will that look like? And I think I agree with you, Troy, that, you know, we have seen a lot of innovation. Again, that's also something that is very particular to our region. Most people here on the Cape, many of them are entrepreneurs. We don't have lots and lots of big employers. So you have a lot of people who are self-employed, who are small business owners, and who are very adept at really having a lot of balls in the air and have a lot of challenges. And so I think, you know, when we look at what the summer holds, is the summer going to look different from most of our other summers? Yes. You know, we're going to look at big events and really, you know, take a look at whether or not those events in the way that they've been held in the past are appropriate. But we are absolutely doing that with an eye to supporting that regular influx. You know, the Cape is situated, I think, in a special way. People are going to want to get out. People who've been stuck at home and who have canceled their trips for April school vacation, who didn't do their sort of winter getaway somewhere warm, they're going to need to get away. And I think the Cape is the perfect place. You can do long weekends, you know, even day trips. So I think we're situated in a really special way to bounce back from this, you know, when we start to lift some of those restrictions. So you know, we're working with the chamber, having conversations with them. One of the things that I can tell you that the board is going to have on our upcoming agenda is talking about, you know, do we create some kind of fund to support businesses here in Falmouth? A lot of people have been asking us.
I just wrote that down. Good thinking.
So we're going to have that conversation as a board. What does that look like? Do we partner with, you know, some of the existing 501c3s that we have in our community that are very well connected in terms of understanding needs and, you know, meeting those needs? What does that look like? So that's something that we're going to look at, because not everyone is going to be eligible for some of the relief coming through SBA for all the reasons we talked about. Also, you know, some folks just, there are many businesses like Bill's that, you know, employees, some of them aren't even on. We have hotels that there aren't any employees being paid right now, and they haven't been because they're on unemployment because the season is closed. So their needs are going to be different. So we're going to look at those ways to support our businesses here at home.
That's excellent.
Excellent. And
could I just
Michael,
jump in?
I know Michael, you've been involved in being the recipient of many of the same questions and ideas and thoughts that Megan and Sue have as people reach out both to the local leaders in the town government and to you. So why don't you join this dialogue and really share some of the feedback that you've been getting and how you've been working with the town.
Well, sure. I mean, first and foremost, you know, I want to thank both Megan and Sue for coming on the show. And then, and to Megan's point, we've been talking to town government, and we've worked very closely with them. And it's very encouraging for those folks who haven't heard before. I mean, the town is very engaged, and the select board is very engaged in thinking about what comes next. I'm a glasses half full kind of person. I don't have a crystal ball, but like with Megan, I agree it's going to come back. I think the thing that's unique about Falmouth that we need to keep in mind is that we have a seasonal build-in in the 43% of the homes that are second homes. So when the school year is over, et cetera, July, August, the people that own those homes are going to come down here and they're going to use those homes. To Megan's point, they're going to need to get away. Those who can work from home are going to work from home. We may not hit the high numbers that we've hit during a regular tourism season, but we have a lot of room to expand. There's going to be 32,000 of us that are here right now. There's going to be 60, 70,000 people here anyway, just if you fill up those second homes. And then, of course, the additional 30,000 people or so will be the hotels and all, and that is yet to be seen. So I think, to the point that Megan's bringing up, we have to have these conversations. We have to start thinking about how we can conduct business and generate business to send a message out to the rest of the Commonwealth and the rest of the country that Falmouth is going to be open for business in a safe manner. 100% health comes first. And to that point, some of the suggestions we've gotten, which I think are really creative and good, is as little as, creating of the fund, which is great, gift cards, but to also like closing Main Street down. Whether that's done whether that's done for the summer is yet to be said. But, the people that have recommended that is, people can spread out, they can walk around. Restaurants might be able to put tables outside if they're limited to the number of seats that they can serve, or the number of feet people have to stay away from each other. So that's like one thing, Troy, that's a big idea, but several people have brought that up. And I think it's, along with that comes other challenges, like parking. So how do you get people? So we have to take a look at parking and maybe busing people in if that's what we do. But having these conversations now and thinking about it and seeing if it's actually doable is going to be very helpful 30, 45 days down the road when we're looking to open the business. The other thing, I know we were having the conversation earlier, is how do you have people come to the beach safely? Is there going to be a process in play? Well, we have to start thinking about that now.
And can I just say, Michael?
Yes.
Can I just jump in to just say, Bruce Magardo has been, when we talked about closing the beaches, he, just in typical Bruce fashion, I mean, he has got plan A through, W for
right.
how we can have our beaches open in a safe way, depending on, almost any scenario that we kind of play out. So, our beaches are really our lifeblood. And so, the beach committee and Bruce and the town are really thinking about that. So I think you raise a great point that having those conversations now is how we're not caught, unprepared if and when, and really when, things turn around. So that's a great point about the beaches.
Well, and that's really want this show to be a clearinghouse for those kinds of ideas. And we'll talk in just a few minutes about how people that are watching that have some ideas can share them with this group through Michael at the Chamber. Sue, let me give you a chance to jump in and really just share your thoughts, both on the local level as a longtime selectman, but also in the work that you do on a regional level as a member of the regional legislative body, the Assembly of Delegates, and the Regional Economic Development Council.
I appreciate that, Troy. Thanks very much for the opportunity and for the show to be available to folks to look back and really process ideas. I think is tremendously key. With respect to the ideas that Megan has been talking about, that are inquiries that are made to the board, I think we have to look at the municipality a little differently. When Falmouth got together and we had an incident where 2 of our police officers got hurt, there were a lot of questions about funds and how do we help people, because Falmouth cares. And we want to find a way to be productive and to really put our arms around folks in need. And one of the things that was suggested was there's a financing entity called Falmouth Together We Cares. And so that's a 501c3 that's used for a lot of Falmouth needs, and it's ready-made. It's ready to go. And I think it's really, in fact, when we were, the Enterprise read in a little bit and said, it's really about individuals stepping up and wanting to take that role to administer and to outreach and to organize and put these ideas together in terms of helping businesses. So I'm looking forward to that conversation with the Board of Selectmen. It's not unlike a conversation I had with Barnstable County Economic Development Council last week, where we have, county business leaders in all of the areas, whether it's housing. We've got folks from Cape Cod Community College who are adapting and really creating online resources so folks can not only have different ways of running their business from home, but also so they can learn tools such as Zoom. I mean, there are new tools that folks want to come out and really be able to run their businesses and their livelihoods. We've got builders, in their essential operations under the governor's rule, their housing still is being created. And so I think that, the need for the partnership between housing and economic development continues. And that's something that we still have to, look at. How do we, bring that forward with the challenges that COVID has brought? We look at the colleges and schools that are creating new certificates for green energy sources. Dan Webb, for example, is doing electric airplanes now, and the schools are using online platforms to continue to teach kids who are interested. We've got the arts. So the program is not really completely tuned in terms of independent contractors. When you look at all the folks in arts right now who are trying to survive, we're looking more toward nonprofit resources. So these are, I think the biggest thing that can be said right now is we can look at this as a springboard. We certainly need to have the public conversations about what do we need and how can we serve folks. But I think we also have to look at, alternatives, because we hear from, I was looking at CNBC or one of the shows this morning and talking about the reagents to test have not really been available everywhere. So I think we also have to look completely out of the box and look at how do we continue to telecommute? How do we look at the benefits? For example, climate change. There are tests right now that show that our air quality is actually improving because there are not as many folks that are on the road. And when you look at the great news that the Army Corps of Engineers is moving ahead with replacing the bridges, that gives us opportunities for out-of-the-box thinking in terms of what do we really need for transportation to be sure that we're going to continue to be incredibly vibrant. I was on the phone and on Zoom actually with a group of superintendents of schools. This is completely new. We've got teachers who are teaching by Zoom type of formats. We've got kids who have basic nutritional needs. We've got kids who have different ways of learning. We've got parents who have IP educational programs for their kids. All of these various real life concerns are being laid out in front of our educational system, and they're really doing yeoman's work one at a time in getting out the studies, getting out, how do kids graduate? What do we do for vacations? I mean, these are day-to-day things that superintendent of schools are dealing with. And when you look at economic development on the Cape and wanting those young people to stay on the Cape, we've also got to adapt education. So I guess what I would say in terms of really joining with the county with the concerns of the town is to echo what Megan has said, that this region is incredibly innovative. We have the scientific organizations that are here to look at, we've got teachers using the printers to make masks. I mean, everyone is pitching in. So the entrepreneurial spirit, the volunteer spirit, and the caring spirit, which this show grows out of, is there. I think it's right now up to us to really support folks who want to have the conversation about their concerns and help those who really need it, and also look ahead at innovators. And so the Cape Cod can really be the place of seeds for going forward, regardless of the challenges that the COVID.
So Sue, I have a question of you. Are there any funds available in the economic development group, either on the county or maybe Megan on the local level that would help businesses?
So I can answer with respect to the county. The Barnstable County Economic Development Council has moved ahead with this grant run for this year, which is based upon innovations. For example, with housing, we had APCC and housing join.
I mean some immediate need. These businesses are going to be out of business in another couple of months. What do we have immediately we can do? Do you know of anything of that nature?
For the county, there haven't been the funds that the county has from the Registry of Deeds is in good shape in terms of running the county services where it's emergency coordination or dredging and that kind of thing. But there has to date been no additional funding in terms of grants would be probably applied for from the federal government. And so it would really be led from the federal government side, and maybe the county would be used for distribution. So I think that's one of the things that should be discussed for the next round of stimulus funds.
Yeah, and so really, and that's the sort of thing that we want to talk about and explore on this show. It's a really good point that you raised, Bill, because traditionally the way that government has worked, it has to change, and that's why we have the both of you on here to really stimulate that discussion, whether it's on the local or the regional level. And the paradigms in which we've operated for decades are shifting right before our eyes, and they're going to have to continue to do that if we're going to be successful. For instance, one of the things Michael talked about street closures and tables outside, and those kinds of things will require, Megan, a real partnership with the local government, and maybe actions by the local departments, zoning, and the selectman as the licensing authority to really clasp hands with the business community and figure out ways in which we can really change how it is that we do business, so that we can, as Gary will talk about in a minute, hold, and Megan, you said this as well, the public health and social distancing and continuing to flatten the curve as the utmost priority. But at the same time, while we're doing that, have these dialogues so that when things start to open up gradually, we do it in a way that can help those businesses to survive and then hopefully thrive. Yeah, and just I think, to Bill's point is sort of what I was talking about earlier. I mean, there are businesses that, I think about so many in Falmouth, right? I mean, the way Main Street used to look when I grew up, it's like we're in a whole nother world. The choices you have of shops and places to eat, it's tremendous, and it is an enormous draw. But there are places that just opened that, this is their first year of business, their first month of business. I'm thinking of businesses in particular that just literally were opening their doors when the order came to shut. So those businesses, I'm not privy to all of their financial situations, but in general, you're not working with an enormous reserve that you can just go months and months without having some influx of income. And even though we can do some of this takeaway, it doesn't stand in, most restaurants, their biggest piece is their bar, right? I mean, that's an enormous part of so many restaurants in terms of their income for the price point. And that's not open. That's not available for folks. So I do think that we really need to think about how we are going to strategically support some of those businesses that are really going to be on the precipice. I want to be a glass half full person, but the reality is there are businesses, not just restaurants, lots of businesses that may be on the precipice of really not being able to reopen. What I would say is, that's where we need to work in the town, working and spearheading, collaborating with the chamber, with some of, organizations like Together We Can, the service center, trying to come up with some way to support some of those businesses. I would say in terms of a positive way, it's not 1990, it's not 2008. We had a very strong economy going into this. The fundamentals of why that economy was working well are still there for the most part, challenged, but there. We have not had a complete collapse of any particular, industry, not the housing. We haven't had, stocks have been wild, but we haven't had an implosion like we did in 2008. So I think there are lots of really good things to build on. And the role, in my opinion, of
government, municipal government, is going to be filling those holes where the federal government's reaction to this doesn't reach out and touch those businesses, those individuals who really are going to need a hand going forward. And there's lots of ways that can take place. Some of that we've already discussed, and some will be up for future discussions. So I think this board has been one that has been very open to working with businesses and very understanding of, you have a lot of people on this board that actually are self-employed running their own businesses. Sue's one, I'm one, Doug Brown. So we are acutely aware of what it means to really be at the mercy of a changing economy or something like this. My last piece, I would just say in a positive way, we are always going to have challenges. And this is a challenge of a magnitude that, probably none of us have ever experienced before. But, folks who lived through Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey experienced, a similar obliteration of their economy, really overnight. And so when we talk about the challenges that we see coming in the future, this gives us an opportunity to really learn some important lessons and to put important safeguards in place so that when future challenges do come, we aren't trying to reinvent the wheel. We have something to look back on and say, you know what, we did this during the COVID pandemic and this worked well. And maybe we have to alter it a bit to respond to whatever that challenge is. But this is giving us an opportunity because it is such a deep dive in terms of, just so austere in terms of closures and challenges. It gives us an opportunity to really put in place a plan to support our community. And so that's the way I'm looking at it for this board, is to think about the ways that we can learn from this to both address what's happening now, but plan for the future.
Excellent.
And I'll just add one point, if I could, Troy.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So one of the practical, points to remember in terms of what Megan was saying is the town does have reserves because of really careful financial planning. In 2008, when we were hit tremendously, we started a program of building up reserves. And I think that that's something that can assuage, folks' concerns that the town itself is, came into this on very strong financial footing. Now, it certainly means we've got to look at our financial picture as a whole in a new way at this point, but it can't be understated that, having the financial ratings that we do coming into this put us in a better position than other towns.
Yes, and those reserves. Mm-hmm.
Most definitely. And so for Megan and Sue and Michael, if people have thoughts, ideas, if they have their own version of how will we and propose solutions, what's the best way to get those ideas to us through all of you? Michael, we'll start with you.
Well, you can just email me directly at mkasparian@falmouthchamber.com. And, I am happy to take any suggestions and pass them along here to my colleagues. And all ideas are good ideas. We're interested in listening to whatever anybody says. So mkasparian@falmouthchamber.com.
Great. And Megan, for the town hall?
Yep, just, the website, when you go to the town website, you can click and send us emails. My phone number, I'm always happy to provide that. I'll tell you it right now. It's 617-240-8161. That's my cell phone. People should absolutely reach out because, again, there's going to be a lot of different, every industry is going to need a different intervention. So we want to hear from people. 617
go ahead.
240.
I'm sorry, again. 617
240. Yep.
240
8161.
I think I know, Megan, who your first call is going to be from. Yeah.
I can't believe he doesn't have that number already in his Rolodex.
I never bother to select people.
No, we love it. Honestly, the best ideas come from people, even when they reach out to us in frustration. It is incredibly helpful. We learn so many things. People who have lived here for a long time have a great perspective. New folks who are bringing in their expertise or their thoughts from their communities who do things differently. We really value it. So we hope people will continue to reach out to us. It's very helpful.
Indeed.
Right, can I jump in? I'm going to jump in before Gary's important stuff. I was trying to think of the things, well, the two ladies are on, select people are on, excuse me. One of the things they could do that would really help out is in the construction industry right now. When it comes time to have those permits approved, if they could expedite that process, you can get a lot of people working very quickly. And of course, those add additional dollars to the economy and everything. And sometimes it takes, I guess they're really delayed down there from what I understand. I don't have any construction projects, but they're really delayed in terms of getting them through. If that could be expedited, I think you'll see a lot more people working, and please help in that area. The other part of it is with the chamber. I'm not sure the chamber is going to run out of money, but any money you have in your economic development or your budget to look towards putting some of that money, other towns have supported the chamber with public funds. The businesses don't have the money. He's not going to be getting dues very shortly. And he's going to need some support. And that's a very central part for businesses to go to for their needs. So perhaps you can find in your budget some money for the chamber. And that's going to lead to the thing that Michael pointed out earlier. At the end of this year, the fall is going to become very, very important. The summer is what it is. But we need to develop some sort of ad campaign. And maybe you can participate with the chamber of something, say, hey, we're still here. Our beaches are still open. And to get ready access to these beaches. So those are some asks that I think we need to put on the table for you.
Great, thank you.
All good suggestions, Bill. And I think what we'll do on behalf of Falmouth Cares is really encapsulate the suggestions, both from this show and from future ones, and continue to pass them on to the select board so that this is really an ongoing dialogue. Gary, we'll shift to you because there's been a point in every show where we point to you to really share with us your perspective from an empirical basis of where we're at. And the whole reason why we continue to have these discussions is because we continue to practice social distancing, and we continue to try to be safe. And that's for a reason. And it based on the conversations our group has had with you, it's beginning to work, but we are in no way out of the woods, to quote from a book I once read. And so we look to you to really give us a sense. What was the name of that book,
Troy?
What's that?
What was the name of that book?
Out of the Woods, as a matter of fact. I see it on Gary's shelf behind him. Gary, tell us, in terms of the research that you've done and where we're at in terms of flattening the curve here in Massachusetts specifically.
Okay, so this is the weekly update. I'm going to take the screen again. Let me make sure I get the right one up here. Okay, here it is. Tell me if you see this. You see the thing that says disclaimer?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so this is data as of April 12th. It's all publicly available data. You can see where I'm getting it. And I just want to emphasize that everyone that's modeling this, and there's some really smart people trying to model this, working with very limited sample size. In the US, and this was as of the end of the day yesterday, we've tested 0.86% of the population. We're doing better in Massachusetts, about twice that, 1.69% of the population. It's not a random sample, and those of you who understand statistics, again, random sampling can help you make larger statistical inferences. The sampling is based on, other concerns which have to do with immediate health concerns. So forecast uncertainty is very high. We talked about this last week. I'll just do this briefly again. When you're talking about epidemics like this, you're talking about growth and exponential growth. And this factor on the right, this 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, every day that gets multiplied by itself to figure out how big the population is that's infected the next day. 1.1, for instance, takes 7 days to double. 1.2 or 20% growth takes only 4 days to double. 40% growth only takes 2 days to double. And again, for the people in business in the room, this is like compound interest. The problem is it compounds every day. Okay, so this is some recent data. This is both Massachusetts and the United States. The United States, the whole country, is the blue line. Now, the blue line is dominated by, well, not dominated, but 1/3 of the blue line is New York. So 1/3 of the cases in the country are New York. And New York, as I'm sure you're reading about and hearing about, is on the downslope, we hope, of the epidemic, and that's skewing the numbers a little bit. Massachusetts is kind of that red-orange line. And if you look at it, it's kind of hovering. It has been around 10% or 1.1. So it's still, if you go back to the 1.1, that's still at a rate that every 7 days or so, you'd have, kind of double the number of cases. So this is still quite serious. Now, one of the things you notice that these numbers jump around, part of that has to do with the fact that the sampling is not uniform. I mean, we test, some days we test a lot, some days we don't test a lot. And there's been some notice of that in some better models. So I'm going to now talk about the model from the University of Washington. This model tries to predict the future load on healthcare systems, and it was funded by the Gates Foundation and some very smart people there. And it's done pretty well with New York, so that's a pretty good indication that they might have their model pretty close to right. So I want to show you first their model for, and it's really focused on hospital and healthcare resource utilization. I want to show their model, first of all, for the United States as a whole. They're basically saying that we've just peaked and we're on the backside of that. And that's, again, driven largely by New York in terms of need for hospital beds, ICU beds, ventilators, et cetera. Now I'm going to go to Massachusetts. Massachusetts, when we looked at this a week ago, the peak looked like it was going to be sometime this week. They refined their model since then, and they've pushed the peak out a little bit. In fact, they've got the peak happening more like April 26th. You notice the tail in this distribution of hospital utilization is into the beginning of June. So, you know, when you're trying to figure this out, it's again, remember their model, anybody's model, my model, we're all working with limited data. And also when their model, they're only modeling a first wave. They're not considering if you open the door, what, you know, whether there be a second wave or a third wave or whatever. And then finally, I'll put up the Barnstable County data, which is, again, publicly available, which shows kind of a flat, it's really not much of a growth rate, right? It's kind of flat in terms of new cases. Those are the bars. But on the other hand, understand that, again, it's very limited sampling, and also understand that, you know, there's asymptomatic cases out there. So it's hard to draw it's certainly better that this number isn't climbing, but it's not necessarily tremendously encouraging. So I don't know, I kind of look at this number as a better indication for Massachusetts and what might happen here. You know, when people keep asking me what's going to happen on the upside of this, I don't know more than anyone else knows on the backside of this, but there's been a lot of talk about testing and tracking as a way out of this on the way back. And I suspect you'll hear more about that. The more we test and track, the more we could potentially open up on the backside of this. But that's the data that I have to date.
Well, that's very helpful, Gary. And in your opinion, I mean, is it fair to say, obviously, that demonstrates, particularly the peak here in Massachusetts, sometime towards the end of April, that is why the continued social distancing and the practices that have been put in place are so critical to continue.
That's absolutely true. We've pushed the date out, and I know that feels like a bad thing, but in a way it's a good thing. We've slowed the progression down, and that's what the social distancing has done. And I tell anybody to do what I'm doing. I'd say, boy, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, if you're ever careful, be careful now, because if that was an indication of hospital utilization, it takes 5 or 6 days to get sick after you're exposed. It takes another 5 or 6 days to end up in the hospital, right? Well, what does that mean? That means you're picking it up now if you're going to hit that peak, right? You're actually contracting it now. So, you know, gosh, if you can stay home and you can, and there's lots of ways to do it. Gosh, my wife went shopping today at Jack and the Beanstalk, called them in advance. They loaded the back of her car. You can do the same thing at Windfall. You know, you can do the same thing at the hardware store. There's a lot of ways you can still get your stuff and not be out there. So, you know, try to help out if you can. And let's hope on the backside of this, I mean, I don't know any more than anyone else does, but I think on the backside of this, it isn't going to be like you flip the switch, you know, for a number of reasons. One is, you know, just the sociology associated with this, that people will be a bit concerned. And the other is that I think that you can see it both in the municipal level, the state level, and the federal level. The people are understanding that they're going to have to do this in some kind of a sensible way. And it isn't going to be, you know, suddenly it's June 15th or June 10th and it's Mardi Gras. It's going to be, sensible.
Right.
Well, and that's the key. And that really relates back to everything we've said so far in the show and everything, Megan and Sue, that you said. That's why the discussions we have right now about how will we are so critically important, because it's clear that it's not advisable just to flip a switch and return to life as we knew it, prior to coronavirus. That we'll have to find ways to ease back into some sense of normalcy, and that really will require the kind of collaboration that we've talked about throughout this show. So it's speaking of collaboration, we do want to share with both of you today and unveil something special that we at Falmouth Cares are doing. So you may have heard about the fact that we've created a logo that you see behind us here. Thank you. Look at that. That's our Falmouth Cares logo, and as you probably know, that's an artist's rendition of Nobska Lighthouse with a nice heart superimposed on it. And we have, through the generosity of Bill and Linda Zammer and Sam and Judy LaRusso, produced 1,000 T-shirts. There you go, Michael. Look at that, with our Falmouth Cares logo on them. We see those T-shirts not only as something for people to wear and buy, and all of the proceeds from the sale of these T-shirts will go, 50% of the proceeds will benefit the Falmouth Service Center, and 50% will benefit Belonging to Each Other, a local homeless prevention nonprofit. But as importantly, if not more so, we want these T-shirts to be an opportunity for people in Falmouth to show a solidarity, and that we're all in this together. And so Gary and Michael will be leading the publicity. Beth Colt from the Woods Hole Inn and the Treehouse in Woods Hole has agreed to help us out with some of the publicity, and she will be on this show next week to talk about that and to talk about how she's dealing with all of this. And so we're really announcing and kicking off the T-shirt campaign today, but we really hope not only to see the both of you in one, but to really share photos of people with T-shirts so that we can demonstrate in a real, tangible way that we're all in this together.
I want to pre-order. It's such a great way to connect.
It's really cool. Before I get on this call, I got a call from my friend Bob Ripley, who said, I just went online and bought 10 shirts, which he's going to distribute to people. So if you want to order the shirts, it's on the Belonging to Each Other website. So That's where you need to go. We'll have a link on the Chamber website that's going up. We're waiting for this show to put that in place. There'll be links all over the place to go. And thanks to the generosity of Bill and Linda Zammer and Sam and Judy LaRusso, 100% of the proceeds are going to be given to Belonging to Each Other and the Falmouth Service Center. So thank you, Bill, for that generosity, for making that happen.
Thank you. And Sammy, we just, we'll buy more if we have to. We'd like to see thousands of them out there. We just sent 100 of them up to the Falmouth Hospital for the nurses up there and healthcare workers. So they're going to have them as a gift. And we're going to start giving them around town to some of the folks who are really the hardworking people who are working right now, the real heroes of this, the people working in the supermarkets and the drugstores and all those places. So we'd like to really get this out there, and hopefully we'll get folks, we can distribute as many as possible. And again, the money's going to a great cause.
One of the exciting things here is, there's nobody on this video, and there's nobody I've met through this process that doesn't love this town. And I just want to express my thanks to everybody here.
Absolutely, I concur there. And the bell is tolling appropriately, because we are nearing the end of the time for our show. We do have a couple of more minutes. Megan and then Sue, do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share with people that are watching the show here?
Sure. I would just say, I've lived in this town my whole life. My family's been here for many generations, and this is a community. I know everyone thinks their community is special, but this is a place really unlike in the Suzanne Road, these T-shirts and generosity, and fun, because it's perfect. People step in to really meet that need, and that's going to happen in this situation. It is really challenging, so we're getting just each week we sort of have a new return, natural disaster, loss of students in our community that have come together and lifting those families up. No matter what is happening in the community, there is a response both from the private sector, business-wise, from individuals, residents, and from the town, on the town end. And that's what's going to happen here. We have all the tools to do it. So I'm very confident that we will come through this in a positive way.
Megan, thank you. You were a little muffled there, I think, but what I will repeat what essentially what you said was Falmouth is a community like no other, and the generosity of spirit and the generosity of purpose of the people in this community always come together. And what you're doing and Falmouth Cares itself is really a wonderful example of that. Sue, any closing thoughts?
I'll say that this is a necessity is the mother of invention kind of situation. I think with the foundational thoughts that Megan mentioned, we can be on a springboard of innovation. I think we can do better permitting, as Bill Zammer suggested. I think we can do a lot with education and, in terms of our scientific organizations, we can streamline costs, we can streamline ideas and innovation, and we will come out on the other side of this leaner, meaner, and more caring in terms of a community. And Cape Cod, and particularly Falmouth, will be a leader, I predict.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for that. And more caring for sure, because, of course, our group in this show is called Falmouth Cares. If you are interested in supporting our T-shirt project, you can go onto the Chamber's website and get a link, and you can go directly to Belonging to Each Other's website. That's bteofalmouth.com. We will be sharing it widely on social media in the coming minutes, hours, and days. And so look back, and we'll be back here for this show a week from now. And as I mentioned, we'll continue to bring you thoughts and innovation, and we'll continue to answer the question of how will we. So please be generous. I love that Michael's holding up that shirt. I'm Troy Clarkson. I want to thank our guests, Sue Moran and Megan English Braga, and along with my friends and colleagues from Falmouth Cares, Bill Zammer, Gary Vacon, and Michael Kasparian, we are here because Falmouth cares. Be well, and we'll see you next week.
Stay safe.
Gentlemen.
The Falmouth bells were tolling, and our hearts sang on. Was it the spell of our town, or an April dawn? Who knows if we shall meet again? But when the morning chimes ring sweet again, I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay.